Hi, Delyth.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. The wind's quietened down here. I was afraid we'd be doing this in the gale.
Yeah, we had a horrible week. Yeah, but
Yeah, I've just started the recording.
great. Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. So, do I want to introduce our speaker today?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Via Yves. We're at the ninth installment of the Cardamom Seminar Series, and I'm delighted to welcome Professor Delyth Prys today. Just give a quick introduction to Professor Prys. So she was trained as a lexicographer and terminologist and worked on various well-known terminology and dictionary projects, including the Welsh Academy's English Welsh Dictionary and the Historical Welsh Dictionary, Geiriadur Prif Ysgol Cymru. My Welsh pronunciation is probably not the best. I'm doing my best. Since 2001, Professor Prys has been the head of the Language Technologies Unit at Cardamom Bedbyr, Bangor University Centre for Welsh Language Services. And she there leads a mixed team of linguists and software developers where they share the vision of revitalizing small languages like Welsh through developing language technologies for them. And her research interests therefore align very well with the day that's in it today, namely International Mother Language Day, for those of you who haven't realized. And this day is held to promote awareness of linguistic diversity and cultural diversity, and also to promote multilingualism. So again, Delyth, we're very pleased to have you with us this evening. Diolch fawr iawn, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, diolch yn fawr. And it's great to see you all again. I think we're a very small community in developing language technologies in Ireland and in the countries of Great Britain. So I know some of you well anyway, and it's, yes, we are a close-knit community, and it's good to share things with each other. So today I'm going to be talking about what's different in language technologies for our small languages. And when we come to language revitalization, that's what does that really involve for us in language technologies? Is it different to the way we do language technologies for any of the major languages? And is it important for our revitalization efforts? I want to talk a little as well about our underpinning language policies, because they're important for us in Wales anyway, and to give you a little bit of a taste for some of the recent tools and resources that we're developing in Wales. I also need to talk about licensing and crowdsourcing. Licensing isn't my favourite subject, but it really is important for us when we do come to develop language technologies. And at the end, I'm going to talk a bit about digital language equality, more in the European context as well, because we're not an island into ourselves. We are part of the wider European language ecosystem. So to begin with, some thoughts on language revitalization. We've been thinking about this for years. I think going back to the 1990s, we were aware that computers and the internet were becoming more and more important, and it was all done through the medium of English, and it was pushing our own languages very much to the periphery, if they weren't already so marginalized. But anyway, it was David Crystal's book in 2001, Language Death, where he talked about how languages will progress if their speakers can make use of digital technologies. It was one of his 7 postulates about reversing language death or ensuring our survival. So we very much took that to heart at that time. We were also exercised by the coolness factor, as I call it at the time, the way that for young people, if your language isn't involved in this brave new technological world on computers and so on, it's a loser language basically, and they're just not going to speak it. So that was maybe the coolness factor was more important at the beginning than the practical considerations, which have just come to the fore since then. But things like, you know, basic writing aids, spell checkers, grammar checkers, so important for speakers of minoritized languages, because very often we haven't had education through our own languages in schools, so we're not very confident in writing them. So that's one practical consideration which is foremost in our minds. Education then as well, and especially in Wales, Welsh medium education, which has grown tremendously in the last few years. But if we didn't have the digital aids for it, we just couldn't function in the education system through the medium of Welsh. Especially, it's been proven in the last 2 years with COVID and with a huge shift to work remotely. It's really been a help to our schools, to our Welsh medium schools. Then disability aids as well. Disabled people can be doubly disenfranchised if they're speakers of minority languages. Now they know that disability aids, speech technology, especially text-to-speech and speech recognition, have been really important in empowering disabled people to see, to hear the written words being spoken aloud, and to be able to speak, to action things if you can't move, maybe. They're also a great aid to people. But if they're only available in English and you speak another language, of course you are very much excluded from this new world. So really, for your language to keep up, for you not to abandon your language for another major language, you do need these technologies. Then language learning, of course, that's very important for second language learners, of which minority languages depend a great deal nowadays if they want to increase the number of speakers. Adult speakers, especially new speakers of the language coming in, are important for our language's survival. And then lastly there, I've put a note in about health, because again in Wales, we're trying to develop bilingual services in the field of health. And if you don't have them in Welsh, it's very much a loser language in reality. And I know that local authorities nowadays are looking at new ways to help people stay in their own homes, things like something that will tell them when it's time to take their tablets, or they need to drink something, and so on. And it's so alien to think that these messages would come through in English to them if they're Welsh speakers, and they might be older, they might have Alzheimer's, all these conditions that afflict us in old age. So again, language technologies are really important, and doubly more so for our smaller languages. So we have lots of friends in the international language technology community, and they think sometimes that what it means for a minority language is, if you have something in English, you need the same thing in your small language. But I don't think that's always true. We have different priorities. I mean, it would be wonderful if we had everything that we had in English, in Welsh also, but we have to prioritize, and we need to know what the most basic resources are, the ones that will have most impact on our language communities. And they include basic things like digital dictionaries, corpora, and writing aids, I mean, spelling and grammar checkers and so on. Because some of our smaller communities, language communities in Europe, don't even have those yet, or not enough of them, or not to a high enough standard. So the priorities might be different. And we tend to lump minoritized or endangered languages together with less resourced ones. And there is a certain truth in that, because of the problem for all our languages is that we don't have enough data. This continuous need for big data and even bigger data that's needed to produce our tools and resources. But if you're a small language, if you're marginalized, if you're less resourced, which, you know, a language can be less resourced and have many millions of speakers, but if it doesn't have the text corpora, the speech corpora, it is still counted as a less resourced language because it needs those resources to build the other products, the tools and the services from your basic resources. So we make common cause with less resourced languages that have more speakers, but especially for minoritized and endangered languages, we might typically not have that state support. It might not be an official language in its region. It might not have education through the medium of that language. And so the amount of text and speech available to it will be far less. So there's some talk internationally as well now of helping the smaller languages by developing new cross-lingual methods, transfer learning and so on. And this idea that you can help all languages and that smaller languages will catch up with the bigger ones through these new multilingual methodologies. But that's true to a certain extent, and we do use some of these international tools now to help us, but you still need data in these small languages, and there is an inherent difference there, I think, with doing language technologies in some of the smaller languages because of that. So that comes me to the philosophy that we've developed in Wales anyway, of the need for permissive open source licenses to further our work. Now then, if it's paid for with public money, and in Wales we've been fortunate recently in getting grants from the Welsh Government, so if they've paid us to develop the work, then we think that our resources and tools and products and services should be licensed under permissive licenses. Also, if we want help from volunteers, and in our community, we're heavily dependent on language activists and crowdsourcing methodologies to get the amount of data we need. So they expect, if they are contributing their texts, their speech, if they're recording their voices, for example, then the last thing they want is for the fruits of their labor to be tied down by some considerations of being only available to some people and not to others. So it's easy to get volunteers to donate their resources if they are insured, if they know that those resources will be kept open and available to all. That's also true of international companies where we want them to include Welsh, in our case, or another language in their list of languages, because they will not pay out a great deal of money to develop material for a language if it's not commercially viable for them. And if it's a small number of speakers, for Welsh it's only 500,000 speakers, that size of a commercial market isn't large enough for them usually to think it's worth investing in it. So what they want to do is to be able to avail themselves of what's openly available out there. So that is a help to get your language into the international arena as well. But also there are local SMEs, we know this in Wales anyway, who want to be able to integrate our resources or tools into their own products. And that helps with the economic revitalization of these peripheral areas, because a lot of our minoritized languages are spoken in maybe less accessible areas that have suffered economically. And this way of helping your language, helping promote language technologies in it, also provides an opportunity for some local companies to establish themselves in those areas. And so you're helping them linguistically, but you're also helping them economically. So just to give you a little bit of background of where we come from in Bangor University itself. We were established back in 2001, and it was really the beginning of that huge expansion of digital, of the digital world, of smartphones coming in, of the internet being more prevalent, of social media coming to the fore, and so on. And it was a sort of bottom-up approach. It was a matter of, we'd been doing terminology standardization. There were some orphan projects around, like Castell spelling and grammar checker. So it was a matter of consolidation, or consolidating all these different projects. And then in 2004, we had a bit of a breakthrough when we were awarded an Interreg project jointly with Ireland, and jointly to work with between the Welsh and the Irish languages. And that was really seminal for us in establishing Welsh speech technology research at Bangor University. And since then we've grown. Now we have 12 members of the unit, and that's the most we've ever been, really. And we're all specialists in different things. And I think I have to mention especially here Delyth Prys, who's our lead software developer. And a lot of the most innovative ideas have come from him. But especially being a mixed team of linguists, software developers, we've been able to fast track, I think, some projects there where if you're still working in different silos, the linguists in one dark corner of the university and the software people in another dark corner, then it's much more difficult to develop these projects quickly and get new innovative ideas, especially quickly, to market. And recently, we've been able to establish a new master's in language technologies at the university, because up till now, there was a shortage of people who could become researchers in our unit, especially if we wanted them to have some knowledge of the Welsh language. We had to train our own people on the job, as it were, and upskilling our own young people, I think, is really important in this field. So we've been able to do a bit of that recently. This is the second year now that the MSc is running. And it's not just Bangor, of course. We do work together with other universities in Wales and beyond. I've already mentioned Ireland, but we are the only research unit in a Welsh university that is dedicated just to develop language technologies. So just a word about the policy background then. The Welsh Government has had the ambition for many years, as have we as a Welsh nation, to increase the numbers of Welsh speakers. But then back in 2017, we had this ambition. It was crystallised as an ambition to have 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Now, why 2050 is just a catchy, imaginative way of phrasing that ambition. But the point is here, the point I'm trying to make is that language technology has been a crucial part of this vision from the start. And there are two quotes here from that strategy document, that high quality language technology has to come available during the early stages of this strategy, and especially to support education, workplaces and social use of Welsh. So that is the core vision here. And also I made the point about the Welsh economy, and it's reiterated here, for many years, if the Welsh language was being given money in Wales, there was some criticism that it was wasted money, that we shouldn't sort of support Welsh, that the money should go towards the economy and so on. They're not mutually exclusive. As I said, really, you have a language industry, and it helps employ young people in your local area. So the way we have, I'd go further than this extract does really. It talks about education, translation, language planning, consultancy services, but I'd also talk about the software industry. For example, we have a new science park in Anglesey, and that's really a powerhouse now for bringing high quality jobs to sort of deprived areas really, and being able to employ young people who would have moved away otherwise to get lucrative jobs. So it all ties together. But just a strategy is all well and good in itself. It's needed a more focused action plan to really look at what's needed to be delivered. And this action plan was published in 2018, and it's had 3 particular areas in focus. That is speech technology, computer-aided translation, and conversational artificial intelligence. Unfortunately for us, it was the same 3 areas that we had identified as being priorities. So, following the publishing of this action document, we were awarded some funding to carry it out, and that funding is given annually. And then we have a program, an annual program of resources and tools that we want to deliver within that year. It's quite ambitious. The government always want their money's worth, and it doesn't really provide us with a longer term horizon of being able to take our time to develop some of the basic resources. But anyway, this is what we've got to work with. And during the current year, this work has been split into 4 parts. NLP, some of those basic tools like a list of stop words, an anonymizer, updating our CC0 lexicon and our CC0 corpus. So sorry, I got that down twice there. But anyway, there's a lot of resources we've done for the first pass in the previous year, but it's a continuous battle to keep them updated. You can't keep still in this world, you need to update them. And as you have more data coming in, you can update your resources as well. And the most exciting thing there this year maybe for us is the dependency parser, which we'll be publishing in a couple of weeks' time. And then for speech technology, we are recording 4 new voice talents because you need these synthetic voices to be able to provide things like automated announcements on your train stations. We have these bilingually in Wales, but they have to be manually recorded at the moment. So you want a choice of voice talents, male, female, northern accents, southern accents, and so on. And we found that amateur voices weren't good enough, and we've gone for better quality professional actors now who provide us with better quality synthetic voices. So we've also got things like improved dictation model in there, improved acoustic model, because models are really becoming crucial for us as we work in a neural net environment. So we're very quickly trying to develop new models, and as we do so, we publish them online so that they're available for other people to use as well. And lastly there, the prototype transcriber for automatic subtitling in Welsh, which I'll be coming back to in a minute and showing you a bit of that. And also our translation technology, because the translation industry is important. And although some people say, machine translation, what do we need that for? Really, with a bilingual policy in Wales, it can be quite costly to support all those translators, and this really keeps the cost down. It enables you to translate far higher volumes, and really, if we were honest, the quality is also improving. So this year we're going to be releasing a new machine translation engine in the field of health. So we've gone for limited domain or domain-specific engines now for specific fields where you have a lot of technical terminology, for example. And then lastly there, Casella is our legacy spelling and grammar checker, which has been great for many years, very popular with the Welsh public, but you need to update it all the time. And what we're doing this year is adapting it to use as an add-in for Google Docs and Office 365, because many more people now are moving their documents and the document writing to the cloud, and the old Windows-based one just isn't of so much use anymore. And we're also gamifying some of the mutation rules because Welsh learners find this handy. There are grammar rules there which tell you, if you've made a grammar mistake, it tells you why, but it's boring. So we're looking at making that more interesting to people who are learning Welsh. And just for you to get a feel of the way that what you really have here is different building blocks, and they fit together. So some of the things in that list I showed you were sort of noddy things, like, what is a little stop list of words. Well, it's one component in your bigger system. So here's an illustration which I've borrowed from one of my colleagues because it's nicer than one I could draw up myself. So you have the input from your text corpus there. And then you have to do your NLP. You need an alignment tools to make sure that your Welsh and English sentences match there. And then you have to build your system, and then you have to have something to listen to it in the end. And one of the things, I think that's my next slide, yes. One of the things we're very, very proud of is our text-to-speech engine that we did specifically for the National Health Service and for their patients. Because going back to this thing about how people who are disabled are sort of doubly disenfranchised. Well, if you were in the unfortunate situation of losing your ability to speak, and this might be because you have throat cancer, for example, you know that you're going in for an operation and that you might not be able to speak well afterwards, then you can bank your voice. This has been available in English for many years, and you can have your own voice built up as a synthetic voice. So you can type in what you want to say and it will speak it with your own voice. This wasn't available for Welsh. So we worked with the National Health Service, we worked with their speech therapists to produce a system like this and to be able to bank patients' voices and then build that patient's voice synthetically. We had to do some very, I won't say clever stuff, but we were aware that patients would tire easily and would not be able to read out that long recording script we had for other people. So we had to design as small a set as possible, and maybe using some other resources as well to build a system without tiring them out too much. And then after doing this initial system, we realized, oh, actually, they need to be able to speak synthetically in both Welsh and English, because the reality for any minoritized language is that you can't live your whole life in that language. You're switching between languages. If you're a Welsh speaker, you often have to speak English. You might live in a mixed language family, your wife or husband might not speak Welsh, but whatever it is, you're constantly moving between the two languages. And then we realized we had to record patients' voices in English as well and try and create a bilingual system for them so that they could speak both languages. And now we're able to refine this. We understand that we can develop systems that use even less of the patient's own voice to build a system for them. So hopefully we'll be able to continue this in further work. But really the psychological element we've seen in this, the way that people who are faced maybe with unpleasant operations ahead of them, so having something like this to do really helps their mood and their motivation. So this is another project that we've been engaged in within this larger project, and that's to create a digital personal assistant. We've called it Maxen, similar to Siri or Alexa or any of these personal assistants that are popular now in English. And of course, we can't sort of steal that little Alexa tower or that's Google, OK Google app or whatever. We have to find a way of doing our own hardware as well. But what we did here...
Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
I'm sorry, I have an Alexa by my side and she's woken up at the mention of her. That was, of course, a bilingual one, and sorry, a monolingual English one. So that is the way that our homes are being anglicized, if you needed a demonstration of that. But anyway, what we've done with Maxen is to put it on a phone. So it's a phone app. And it's there for Android and Apple phones. And we're building up its skills. It has, at the moment, 8 different skills. We hope to publish 3 additional skills before long. But it can read the news for you. It goes to the Golwg 360 website to read the news headlines. That's an online Welsh newspaper. It'll give you the weather forecast in Welsh. It can also read the first paragraph of a Wikipedia article for you. Our Wikipedia colleagues have been very active in Welsh. They've have their own ambitious targets of increasing the number of Welsh articles. And what we did, we went and looked at the nature of questions we could ask it. And, you know, who is so-and-so, what date were they born, such things. And we managed to boil it down to some 300 questions, I think. So it's been quite successful in being able to identify some information and being able to read it back out to you using our synthetic voice, of course. We've also managed to get it to play Welsh language music on Spotify. And if you are an artist with a Welsh name, it's not always easy to find or to get Spotify to know it in English, because Llewen is one of my favourite singers. But if you ask in English for music by Llewen, it doesn't recognise that sound. And some of the other bands have weird and wonderful names like Gwibdaith Hen Vran. An English language music system doesn't recognise that name very often. So there's a practical consideration here as well. It's great to be able to ask this in Welsh to play music for you, and it plays the music from Spotify. Also, some of these skills are very basic, of course, giving you the time and the date, but still useful to have. And the last one there, the ability to play television programs through the S4C Click website. We worked with S4C to be able to deliver that. They were very keen for that to be voice enabled as well. So that also is working very, very well. And we hope next year to really aim at something much more ambitious, which is to provide speech-to-speech translation through the Maxen app. So we'll see how that goes. But you see, once you have these different building blocks, you can put them all together then and build ever more sophisticated products. This is our latest product. We're very, very excited with this. It's called Trawsgrifiwr, and it is a speech recognition in a way. It recognizes your speech and it types it out. In this case, in the form of subtitles for videos. It wasn't on our initial lists for this year, but what happened was that there was new disability legislation, which we weren't aware of. But the legislation said that for students who were having lectures and so on, if they were being subtitled, they needed that to be available in Welsh as well. And we rushed to be able to deliver this in time to conform to the needs of students, basically. If you wanted to keep them up for more than 2 weeks, you had to provide these subtitles. And you can see here that the transcription is in Welsh on top, and you also have it in English underneath. And this is actually Jill Evans, who was our member of the European Parliament, coming to speak to us in one of our conferences last year. So we were able to provide the subtitles for her speech. And actually Jill Evans is the person who was able to present a resolution for digital equality for languages in Europe to the European Parliament, which succeeded. So we're very indebted to Jill Evans for her work in this area as well. So far, the system we have running for a Trawsgrifiwr has about 70% accuracy. We have improved on that, and in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be able to publish an improved version, I think. And this is, of course, in the standard spoken Welsh. It performs less well if you try and run it through a television program, which is all in dialect or something like a soap opera. But if it's a measured speech, or if it's a lecture or something of that nature, it performs quite well, because also you can go back and post-edit it. If it's your lecture, you can read the notes and you can go in and you can correct anything that has been transcribed wrongly. And it does save the lecturer or the transcriber a huge amount of time doing that. And this system was developed using speech recordings from Mozillas Common Voice project and training models from Oscar's European corpus, and using Mozilla's deep speech recognition engine. And that just shows you the different elements you have to bring together to build a system such as this. And just a word quickly about publishing and dissemination, because it's no good for us to be creating all these wonderful new resources and products and people don't know about them. So first of all, we did our national portal for language technologies, where we publish all these things. But for the code and so on, we also put them in the international GitHub repository. And more recently, everything that we create goes on the ELG, European Language Grid Network, and I'll be coming back to that in a minute. And we also have our national technology network now. And I should also mention our Celtic Language Technology Group, which is great for bringing all of us together who work with the different Celtic languages. And of course, we have our usual academic conferences and papers. So where are we moving on from here? The need for more data is never ending. It's constant, and it's not just trying to catch up with today's requirements. The goalposts move all the time, and new technologies, new ways of doing things mean even greater quantities of data. We're also trying to improve the quality of our products. You saw the transcriber and the word error rate there. We're trying to improve on that. Sorry, that should be BLERST score, not burst scores there. That seems to measure how good machine translation is. So we're trying to push the boundaries there with additional data and improved methodologies as well. We're trying to join up disparate bits of work, especially in NLP pipeline right through, so that you don't have to join the different bits together yourself. And bringing smaller resources together to create more complex products, like the speech-to-speech translator that we hope to do in the coming year. And also we've had this new understanding, I think, from the Llaethur project of the need for bilingual models and bilingual products, because we do live in this bilingual world, and it's not just the text-to-speech that needs to be bilingual. So we're just beginning to understand these requirements and to work out sort of concrete ways of delivering on them. But that's very much watch this space. That's where we'll be moving to in the next couple of months. And also, I think I talked about standard language with the transcriber. We need to look more on dialects and language registers. By language registers, I mean things like formal language and informal language, because a lot of our speech stuff, also the machine translation stuff, depends on that you're using fairly neutral language. And the deeper you get into a dialect, or I talked about that TV soap, for example, then for it to be able to perform well on that sort of material, we do need further work. So going back to the need for ever more data and the crucial role of volunteers and crowdsourcing efforts. For text out of copyright books, I remember Will Lamb was talking about this in the Cardamom series a few weeks ago. And some volunteers, notably my husband, to be honest, he's been hard at work OCRing out of copyright books. They're a wonderful source of text material that's free of any IP matters. We're also getting donated original material. Wikidata, that's CC0 rather than Wikipedia itself, though for Welsh we've had some Wikipedians have donated their articles to us. And translation memories. Now that's why I've got that very bad slide to, showing to the side of it. It hasn't come out well there really. But one of the things that we've done this year is establish a new platform where public bodies in Wales can upload their translation memories, and they can also download them to use in their system, so they can share translation memories together. But also, if they're appropriately licensed, we can also use them to put into a text corpus and to build machine translation. So that's quite an exciting development that's just starting to gather momentum now. And then for speech, we had our original Paldorio app, where we started to gather recordings of their own voices from language activists, really, and from people who wanted to see the revitalization of the Welsh language. And then Common Voice took this idea on board, and they've got this wonderful international system for many languages to enable us to build up speech corpora. And increasingly, we're having partnerships with public bodies in Wales, not just the translation companies, but also the National Library of Wales, which of course holds a great deal of data itself. So Mozilla's Common Voice, I don't have time to talk a lot about it now, but we have been collecting voices for a number of years now. And again, it's been my husband in a volunteer capacity who's run a number of campaigns to get more people to donate their voices. We've got over 1,000 people by now who've donated their voices, and over 100 hours of recordings. We're going for the 1,000 hours, and that's going to be, you know, a lot of hard work for us. But it's these resources that allow us to build our transcribers and our speech technology things, and also to put even the text corpus into our CC0 corpus to be reused in other contexts as well. And then, okay, it's been difficult getting people to donate text and speech to us as free of IP considerations. And one of the main stumbling blocks for public bodies has been the question of anonymization. They are afraid, even though translation memories, for example, aren't supposed to hold any sensitive materials, but something might have slipped through. So being able to anonymize things is very important. So that's one thing that we have to deliver. The other thing we thought about then was that we could jumble up the sentences, because what publishers were afraid of was that somebody'd be able to take out the whole text of a book and create a pirate copy and sell it off. But really, if you jumble them, it's difficult to do that. And we've had some success in getting people to donate text corpora with the jumbling of sentences. And the other thing is really a breakthrough in the last few weeks of when people will not allow us to release the text as a corpus, they will allow us to release the models that we've built on those corpora, and to release those models under CC0 permissive open license. And that is really, I think, a game changer for us, because what we've understood recently also is that models don't need annotated corpora. So that has been a huge breakthrough in understanding on our part. And just to close or to wrap up, really, I did want to talk about where Welsh stands in the European context. Now, you saw a clip of Jill Evans there, our local Member of Parliament in Europe before we left the European Union, unfortunately. But following on from Jill's successful resolution, there was a call to do a roadmap and agenda to deliver digital language equality in Europe, not just for Welsh and not just for official EU languages, for all the languages of Europe, the official EU ones, the regional ones, and the minoritized, the very small endangered languages as well. Hugely ambitious targets to do away with digital language extinction by 2030. And hopefully we are now in the stage of writing a report, or several reports, to be honest. This will lead to a new funding programme by the European Commission. So this is something for us all involved in language technologies and language revitalization to keep an eye out for. The current project is drawing to a close, and it does include updates to the current MetaNet series of white papers on languages in the digital age. It was only done on 31 European languages, and Welsh was the 31st language. And of course, it came to the conclusion that more than 20 European languages, including Welsh, was in danger of digital extinction. So the new reports, which we are now in the process of finalising, will be published in an updatable way. So they'll be available on the web for you, and will be kept current as more resources and more tools and projects are being produced, because the ELG data will provide that. So I need to tell you quickly what the ELG data is. This is the European language grid. And what it is a sort of portal for, it's a cloud platform, and it's somewhere you can upload everything, tools, resources, but also things about the environment, the universities that are active in doing research in this field. Everything will be up there. It's like somebody described it as yellow pages for language technologies in Europe. And what you can see there on the left is I've just typed in Bangor as a filter, and then you can see all the resources that we have developed recently. The ones I've shown you very quickly, and more than that, I think we have over 100 tools and resources from Bangor alone in there. And of course, some of the multilingual ones come up under Welsh as well. But that then enables, if you're a developer in Europe or anywhere in the world and you want to include Welsh in your new project or whatever, you can quickly find out, is there an anonymizer for Welsh? Is there a transcription tool for Welsh? Is there a speech tagger for Welsh or for any other language? So that is really a key development, I think, for us all in an European context. And recently I've been bombarded with these metrics for language revitalization, or for where we're at as European languages. And I know that slide, it's too the print is too small for you to see at the bottom there, but you can guess which language is on the left with the most resources. It's English, of course, followed by German, French, Italian, and Spanish. And then you have mostly the green languages are the official. The yellow ones are things like Icelandic and Norwegian, sort of adjacent languages. The red ones are the regional or minority languages. And I've put a big arrow there to indicate where Welsh is at. I'm not sure if this metric will be used in the end. It's one of several that we're trialing at the moment. You can see at the very end there, that long tails down, you have the smaller, weak languages at the end. But we are trying to measure where our languages are at. And I am pleased to be able to say that Welsh seems to be moving ahead. It's moving up that long tail. And it is due to the work in recent years that we've been able to produce some of these tools and resources. We've been able to reuse previous ones we've done. We've been able to update them, and we've been able to put them into more sophisticated products. And I hope we'll continue to do this for many more years to come. So I'm sorry I raced a bit at the end there, as I was conscious of the time going on. But diolch yn fawr, thank you all for listening. And if John and the others are happy, I can take your questions. John, it depends on how you want to take it now.
Okay, thank you very much for a really interesting talk. Yeah, so we've plenty of time for questions. So does anyone want to anything? Maybe I will start off. So you put a lot of emphasis on CC0 resources. Now, one thing I find is it can be quite hard to convince people, particularly of CC0, with CC BY, at least you have the requirement that you have to, cite and attribute the resource. But many people will also insist on non-commercial. So I don't know if you've had issues with that, if people insisting that, they're happy to make resources open, but want restrictions like attribution and non-commercial usage.
Yeah. I mean, we've recently emphasized CC0, but we've also used all sorts of open licenses according to what's possible. It is the art of the possible. We've used MIT licenses, Apache licenses, LGPL. We try not to use ones that don't allow commercial exploitation, the very restrictive GPL ones, because we believe that we want international companies and the software sector to be able to use our resources as well. And if you go for the very restrictive ones, they won't be able to do that. And I don't think that they would pay. I mean, I think the restrictive licenses came from a perspective who thought that commercial companies can afford to pay. Now that's true for the major languages maybe, but it's not true for the smaller ones. I know we've used the BY, the CC BY with attributes ourselves last year because people wanted that attribution. So it is very much what you're able to get away with. But that's why I emphasized at the end also this new method that we're developing of that it doesn't matter so much what license the corpus has, as long as you can produce models from it and that those models are permissively licensed. CC0 is what we're aiming for at the moment, but hey, again, it's whatever we can get away with. But we do think that producing those models are the way ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think the legality is more questionable, but you certainly have big companies like Google, seem to do that. They're quite happy to call lots of text and then call it a model and not worry about any licensing restrictions from it being a derived resource, right? So,
yeah, but you and I guess everybody who's listening today, we're beholden to our universities, and I mean certainly because I think sometimes we could push things a bit, but our universities are risk averse, and rightly so. They don't want because these things haven't been tested in court. That's the main point here, and until somebody's brave enough to test something in court, we're stuck with the situation we're in, and with a very conservative interpretation of what we can release and not release under a permissive license.
Brave or unlucky, perhaps a bit of both. Good. Are there some other questions for Delyth?
Question about using resources in schools in Scotland, where we're not nearly so advanced. There is some very good Gaelic medium software, nearly all produced by Michael Bauer, Firefox and Vivaldi and OpenOffice, LibreOffice, all available in Gaelic. But in Gaelic schools, as far as I know, they use practically none of it, and they don't even have the most fundamental thing you could have for writing in Gaelic, which is the United Kingdom Extended Character Set. Their PCs are with the United Kingdom character set, which can't even do accents without you going into the control panel and changing it. And the reason for it is that software support is practically in schools is outsourced to companies by the education authorities, which roughly match the local government areas. And they don't know anything about Gaelic. So even though they could provide the United Kingdom extended keyboard in all PCs, which would be of benefit to French and everything else, they don't. And do you have that problem in Wales, or do the schools use the Welsh software without problems?
Yeah, no, it's still problematic, especially if their IT people aren't aware of something being out there. When things are outsourced now, there usually are these sort of groupings together of not just individual schools, but they are tried to work together in a group of schools to provide certain services, and that's helped to make Welsh language requirements more visible and people more aware of them. And also, I guess we're more lucky than you are in terms of the Welsh Department of the Welsh Government is aware. Certainly we started with terminology needs, and maybe it's a good thing that we also supply standardized terminology for schools in Wales. So we've had that good relationship with the Education Department in the Welsh Government, and over a number of years. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years for these things to build up and for the message to go through. And we have things like a newsletter that goes out periodically to schools, and we use that to draw attention to different things. And maybe that's one easy way, but you need to address not the teachers, but the IT people themselves. And really you need to go to the local authorities then. And I don't know to what extent they work together, or how much independence each local authority has in Scotland. But the message to give them is that really this saves them trouble in the long run. This saves them money in the long run. And yeah, it's a win-win situation for them.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? I see something in the chat.
I have a question otherwise.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so not sure if I'll be able to put this into words well, but you sort of mentioned at the beginning that, and we just had this discussion as well about licenses, that one of your aims is to sort of try and make everything as permissive as possible in terms of licenses. And I think in the beginning you were also speaking a little bit about maybe strengthening a local economy and a sort of a local speech tech scene and things like that. So I'm just wondering if you're at all worried about some big tech companies coming in and taking all the stuff you've produced with these permissive licenses, taking that and, you know, just making money off it, but not putting it back into the community. Because I come from like the stuff we do in the States with low resource languages. We have a lot of speech communities that are very wary of sharing anything because they have such a long history of exploitation. So I'm just sort of wondering what your perspective on that is.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and of the Maori community as well in New Zealand. And when I came across this different perspective to begin with, it threw me. And then, of course, I had to acknowledge the long history of exploitation that those communities had laboured under. But I think, again, that talking to some Native American communities who'd actually paid commercial companies to do a particular resource for them. And it was fine as long as the money lasted and during that project. But the weakness was that once the project ended, the company walked away and you don't have that sustainability there. You know, that project soon becomes obsolete. And the other thing is you haven't trained up your own community to be skilled in these matters, because with us, it's a matter of, okay, so these things are out there for anybody, but they're also used by coding clubs in Wales, by kids learning to code. They are used by local software companies, and we now have apprenticeship schemes and Skill Academy coming up and using them. And I don't know how commercial companies would be able to stop other people from using them. Yes, in a way, and it's galling sometimes when a big company comes along and uses your stuff and doesn't acknowledge it because they don't have to under CC0. I'm going to add something to our website saying you don't have to acknowledge us, but it would be nice if you did, because that helps with grant capture as well. But in the end, we want these things to be in the international projects. We want our resources to be used to improve Google Translate and Bing and all the other international machine translation things as well. And in a way, if they don't acknowledge us, I don't mind, because they're out there for everybody, and it is a level playing field. But what I really want is for our own people, our own SMEs, to use them.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so there was a comment from Cahill about looking into collaboration also with our colleagues in the University of the Basque Country. So obviously there's a lot of great work going in there. We should probably invite them to a Cardamom Seminar Series at some point to have a talk about what's going on in the Basque language. You know, Cahill, if you wanted to add anything to that. Or... Good. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Go ahead, Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid I was just scratching my head.
I had a comment really when we were talking about jumbling up sentences to anonymize them and make sure that the book or whatever. That reminded me of something that happened just last night. I was reading a passage along a public information thing about COVID in German to improve my German partly, and copying chunks of it into Google Translate as a help to myself. And Google Translate is much better than it was a few years ago. Then I came across a short sentence and it got it totally, completely wrong. It got the subject and object wrong. And I realized it depended, it was obvious to me, it depended totally on it was a repetition of what came before the sentence that came before. So it's sentence, when you're machine translating, you do need to consider this sort of environment.
Yeah, but we're finding now that machine translation is coming to so good that we can use it to improve things further. Like with Common Voice, for we needed more sentences for a Common Voice recording scripts, and I'd been doing this manually, and I wasn't able to keep up with it. And then we had translated a huge corpus of sentences from English to Welsh using machine translation, and then manually post-edited them. And we were happy to put up with less than 5% inaccuracies. And it wasn't a critical system or anything. It was just data to be used as sentences to be recorded, and figuring that people who are doing the evaluation can always reject that sentence if it's a bad sentence anyway. But once it comes to less than 5% error rates, we were happy to use machine translation for our own purposes.
And can I ask you a question on the back of that?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose based on my experience with the Irish language and machine translation, I know there were one or two high enough profile cases in 2016 when Ireland was having a centenary celebrations, where one or two government websites were famously accused of simply throwing the English version of the website into Google Translate and putting up the results. Even more recently, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it was criticized that English language documentation was sent out to every home, information about what the disease was and how to take care of yourself and wash your hands and so on. But the Irish language translation was very much an afterthought that, it came in the door several months after the English one had. And there was a conversation in social media about, well, what's the point in printing all of this if people got the English one already and they already understand that, versus, well, the Irish one should have come out in time. Do you see that this very much in Welsh? I know I'm not very familiar with the legislation surrounding what has to come out in Welsh as well as English, but do you see this, and do you find that the machine translation is at such a stage that this isn't a problem, and do people have a certain amount of cop on and do look over it before it's put online or wherever?
Well, it happened in the bad old days that you'd have the English first and then the Welsh would come months later. But using machine translation as a translation aid actually helps bring out both versions at the same time, because what you have and what you should have if you're using machine translation for public notices and stuff, or anything published by public bodies, it shouldn't be a standalone. You just press a button and you get the machine translation out. It should be part of your translation workflow in your translation memory system, that it comes up as another fuzzy match for the translator to consider it and to correct if needed. So in effect, the translator stops being a translator and is now a post editor. So, and we've made huge advances, I think, in the Welsh translation industry in accepting machine translation into translation memory systems and correcting that text. What that then allows you to do is to hasten the translation memory. It takes far less time. I'm not sure of the statistics here, but it's much quicker to get that machine translated text up and to correct it. And then you are able, hopefully, to give us your text or your leaflet or booklet or whatever in both languages at the same time. And also what we're trying to do is you don't have different versions. You have, if it's a booklet, if it's in paper form, you have a bilingual booklet, and you never allow them to go out separately, because, you know, the English one will always have preference if you do that. But that seems to have been quite successful.
Well, I'm glad to hear that's a feature of the bad old days in Welsh, and hopefully it's something we can learn from here. So, Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah.
So there's a question from Azim regarding regarding speech corpus. Were the recorded pieces topic specific?
The speech corpus,
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, it's not topic specific. We are basing our speech work on the data we get from Common Voice, and the sentences that have gone into Common Voice can be on any sort of subject. We've tried to make it sort of quite balanced in terms of different subject matter, and even different sort of scenarios. At one point, we translated some recipes into Welsh as sentences for the corpus, because we were aware that there wasn't a lot of commands there. And what you get in recipes is measure this, you know, turn this, put this in the oven, do that, do this. And it gave us more of that second person in the corpus. And in terms of subject matter, we use some of the books that my husband had OCR'd, so they were quite interesting and varied in topic. Yeah, so no, we haven't looked at any specific field yet for the speech stuff, but it seems to be working quite well with the transcriber. The results we're getting seem to, I mean, all the subject fields seem to be quite well covered.
Okay, thanks. Good. And I see, Remo, you have your hand up. Do you have another question, or?
Yeah, I have a tag-on question. Sorry, something you just mentioned earlier gave me another question. What you were just describing, the process of sort of using machine translation and then having a human translator look over it to sort of speed up your translation process. That's really smart. And I was wondering if right now you're thinking about or spending any efforts to try and get sort of those corrected sentences. So in those scenarios where the human translator corrects something from the machine translated output, if there's any way to get at those corrections, because those could prove very valuable training data for your models.
Yeah, with the machine translated stuff, actually we haven't. And I know that translation agencies that are using this methodology use different translation memory software. Some use Trados, some use Deja Vu, and some use Cyfieithu Cymru, which is our own system. So I'm not sure how much we could impose on busy translators to do that. I mean, in our own institution, because we have our own team of translators in Bangor University, maybe we could ask those to help us. But I know in another context with a trawsgrifiwr, with a transcriber, where some of the lecturers are using our transcribe and then correcting it manually, those are being sent back to us, or not all of them, but if the lecturers and so on are happy to do so, we are getting that transcription material back to improve our systems.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So, well, I'll say thank you very much. It was a really interesting talk. It's great to see about, what's happening with language resources and language technology in Wales. So with that, I'd like to thank our speaker again. So it's a great talk, and well, we'll have the next talk will be announced soon. And I hope to see you all in about a month.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.